So welcome. I'll be a tiny bit more formal now, I guess. Welcome everybody to the Tampa Bay Tableau User Group for May. It's nice to have you all here. If you're in Tampa today, it is hot. Well, I guess if you're not in Tampa today, it's hot here. As it's been lately, even more so than normal, I think, for May. Let us know in the chat where you're joining from today, then maybe I can empathize with some of you and how hot it is and be jealous of others of you. I was in Alachua County. Alachua County. I think it's Alachua County. Ethan is from Florida. I just now remembered. I was in Alachua County a couple of days ago. I wasn't feeling great. I got COVID. So I went out to the woods with my dog and stayed at this like glamping sort of place. It's called Getaway. They're little cabins in the woods. And it was in High Springs, Florida, which I did not know existed. But it's within like 15 miles of all these beautiful state parks. All I did was like hike and hang out with my dog. And there's so much tree cover there that it didn't matter that it was so hot because the trees provided so much shade. I bet before we did all this development in Tampa, it was similar. 37 degrees in PA. Oh my God. I think I'd rather have our nice hot weather. Cool. All right. And let me see. Even if you don't want to share your location, would you put an emoji or something in the chat so I know that you have access to it and it's working as intended for this first go with our new events platform, Bevy. I'm Nicole. The slides that are at the top of the chat, these are interactive. If you've been to one of our last couple of meetings, I've been using these. If you're in my Tableau courses, I know at least one of you is. I saw the attendee list. These are the slides that I use. They're interactive. You can click on the link. You can follow along. All the links in the slides are interactive. I've been talking about how great Gamma is, and I'm actually officially what they call it, Gambassador now. Womp womp. But it's a great product. I highly recommend it. But just full disclosure, they're giving me swag, not money. They're giving me T-shirts or whatever. But I love the product. About me, y'all know me by now. Here's all my social stuff. You can click on any of it and get in touch with me. Ask me any questions you want anytime. I'll do my best to answer them. And then John is not here today, but you know him as well, I'm sure. I'm in VM Ybor, neighborhood-wise, just north of Ybor City. He's in Hyde Park. And then these are the links I really want y'all to see. And I will post the link to the slides in the newsletter and in the LinkedIn group. And if you don't currently belong to the LinkedIn group, you can join with this link in the slides, or if you search in LinkedIn for Tampa Bay Tableau User Group, you'll get 2 results. I didn't realize there was some I think it was from some previous group leaders at some point. So I put the word official. Like, I feel like a moron, but like I put the word official in the title so you'll know which one it is. If you want to share links with each other during the presentations, please go ahead and use the chat for that. Email list, you can click here. We're using this another new platform I really love called Beehive for newsletters. It looks so much nicer. And then of course we're on Twitter at Tampa Talk. And we're going to do a little poll. This one is really fun. So I hope you'll participate. So you can participate by using your phone to scan the QR code. So you open up your photo app to scan it, or you can click the link that's in orange. And so you're stuck on a data viz desert island, and you can only bring 3 charts with you to tell all of the data stories that you have on the desert island. I would be collecting data if I were on a desert island. So, I mean, I'm sure y'all are as well. And now you should see, hopefully, no, not yet. I think you can see the Menti poll now. Doesn't help. I have a slide that looks just like it. No, you can't see it. See, there we go. Okay. So I'll give everybody a couple minutes to vote. And I always have this instruction slide that's the same QR code. Oh, and I think I need to enable, hold on, sorry guys. I needed to enable the show the results. Y'all are making some good choices. I wouldn't take the Sankey either. What have I done now? I'm in like present mode. Oh goodness. Why are they making this so hard for me? Okay, present results. Okay, let's see if this shows you the results. I think it does. Yes. So you've chosen wisely. Bar charts, line charts, text tables and scatter plots. A few more votes coming in, but you know, choose your Sankey if you want to, or your pie chart if you want to. You know, well, I don't know, a tree map is a better choice than a pie chart if I'm going to choose something like that, I think. But this was fun to make. I hope it's a fun little icebreaker tactic. Anyhow, let's see. I'm going to not share my screen again because next I'm going to let Ethan introduce himself. Elisa is going to speak second. She had a conflict here at the very beginning, but she'll be joining shortly. But I'm going to pass it over to you, Ethan.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole. Let me share my screen. I'll kick things off.
And thank y'all for being patient with us as we learn the new platform.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Well, first off, I just want to say I really appreciate everyone joining today. I know your time's really valuable. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come here and visit with us. Like Nicole mentioned, I am from Florida originally. I was born and raised there. So when I come and speak to like the Tampa Tug or the Florida Tug or Orlando Tug, it's like coming home and speaking to my people. So again, really appreciate you guys joining. And Nicole, thank you for the invitation. If you're unfamiliar with who I am, on the screen here, I'm the Director of Analytics Engineering at Playfair Data. We're a consultancy. We do trainings, we do consulting work with clients all over the world. It's probably the most fun job I've ever had. I get to work with a lot of really cool companies in a lot of different industries. And have fun doing it. Data visualization is near and dear to me, and I like to do it. So having it as a job is kind of like a dream. I'm also the co-lead of the Veterans Advocacy Tableau User Group. So the reason I left Florida originally is I joined the military, did my service, and when I got out, I wanted to give back to the veteran community. And I do that through data visualization and through this Tableau User Group. So we help veterans transitioning out. We also host community projects and community challenges where we'll post data sets about veterans or veteran-related issues, so people can do data visualization on that stuff and bring awareness to some of the issues that veterans face. And then lastly, I'm also a member of the Tableau Speaker Bureau and a Tableau User Group Ambassador. But that's enough about me. You guys didn't come here to hear me ramble about myself. So let's dive into the content. And today, what I want to discuss with you is the analytics pane within Tableau and integrating statistical analysis with your data visualizations to bring to life what I call decision science, which is a statistical analysis displayed visually, so the users can very easily consume that information without you having to explain all the technical aspects of statistical analysis to them. So I'm going to jump in. I'm actually going to ride right through here with Tableau Desktop and just kind of show you guys a little bit about the analytics pane and some of the stuff that is built natively within Tableau that you have access to incorporate statistical analysis. And I'll start with just an overview of what the analytics pane is. So when you open up Tableau Desktop, you're going to land on what's called the data pane. And you'll see that over here to the left. This is where your data sources are going to be placed. Your measures and dimensions are going to be listed. You'll have your parameters and so on. If we've been working with Tableau for any decent amount of time, we're all familiar with the data pane to some extent. But there's also the analytics pane, and you can toggle to that by just clicking on it up here in the top left. And now we've toggled to the analytics pane. Within that pane, there's 3 sections. The first section is called Summarize, then Modeling, Custom. And within each of these sections, you'll see these different models and different things that we can incorporate within our view. So let's go through each one of those kind of one by one. And some of these are going to be pretty self-explanatory, so I might just breeze by them. But some of the others, especially when we get into the modeling and some of the stuff we can do within the custom section, I'll spend a little bit more time talking about what's actually happening underneath the hood in Tableau. But to kick things off, let's pull in a constant line. So you can see here, I've built this line chart that's just visualizing sales by month of order date. And if I want to incorporate some sort of indicator or constant reference line drawn across, and there's various use cases for something like this, but you can just click on constant line, drag it from the analytics pane over to the canvas. And you can see when I do that, I'm presented with this new menu that appears at kind of the top left of the canvas. And what it's asking me to do is to add that reference line, and I can add it across the entire table, which it will draw that line across the X and Y axes. I can add it to individual axes, and it's going to aggregate at that level as well. So for this demonstration, let's go ahead and just drop it onto sum of sales, and you'll see it's presenting me with an option where I can type in what I want that constant value to be. You can see I've already drawn 80,000 across here, but let's just say I wanted to set another constant line at 60,000. So I can simply just type in that constant to that box. I can click off of it, and you can see that Tableau's drawn a new reference line across that on my y-axis there. Now, some of the use cases for a very simple integration like this with the constant line, you can set benchmarks using this technique. You can also start to do some analysis. For instance, if your stakeholders were interested in any of the values, any of the months that fell in between these, this is a great way to just add that visual piece so they can very clearly see which months did and did not. If we didn't have this 80,000 here and I remove that, something like this up here, or even some of these values that come close to it, especially as I start working my way right away from the labels on my y-axis, it starts to get a little confusing on where and which are below and above that 80,000 mark. So this is just a very easy visual aspect that you can incorporate within your view to do a simple analysis like that. Very easy value add. But again, that's pretty self-explanatory. Anyone can draw a reference line and set a constant value there. We do have some other options as well in the summarize section, one of them being the average line. So I can simply just drag this over, and you can see it will give us different options on how we want that average aggregated. So I can calculate an average across the entire table or anything that's within the view. I can do it at individual panes. So if I had some sort of dimension on my column shelf, I could calculate out individual averages across each of those different dimensions, or I could do it across every cell within the view. If I wanted to kind of compare averages across each of these individual touch points. For now, I'm just going to drop it on the table, and you can see it draws that average across the entire table here. Again, just another great easy value add to just add this, incorporate it within your view. It's a very simple statistic to calculate, is an average, and a lot of people identify with that and know what that is. So again, very easy way to just drop it into our view. The next one is a median with quartiles. And this is where it starts to get a little bit more advanced. We are just drawing a median line here, but it's also giving us these upper and lower quartiles, which kind of give us this range of where the median and where the data is living. Within these upper and lower quartiles, that's about 50% of your data. So you can see about 50% of our data here falls within this kind of band that it's drawn across. Again, just another great value add, an addition that you can add to your view. The next thing that we can incorporate from the summarize section is a box plot. And there's multiple ways we can implement a box plot on our view. We can do it from the Show Me tab right here, box and whisker plot option. We can build it individually by just selecting our marks and adding these things in here. We can bring it in from the Analytics pane. I believe there's even a way we can incorporate it from one of our tabs up here at the top. Needless to say, there's multiple ways to implement a box plot in Tableau. Just like anything in Tableau, there's tons of ways to do it. But what's cool about a box plot in this analysis, really where we can start understanding our data better. So we can see immediately that maybe we have some outliers that we need to take a look at. We can at least dive into this data point here and kind of see, what's causing this data point to fall outside of our box and whisker plot. Again, just looking at this, we have our upper and lower hinge and a median drawn across each of our dimensions here. And that's what makes the box in a box plot. And again, this box represents about 50% of the data that would fall within each of these dimensions. So we can kind of see the distribution of our data very clearly. And then we have our upper and lower whiskers far out here. Anything that falls outside of those, you could consider an outlier, and we'll touch on outliers and stuff like that further on into the presentation. But for now, just know that it's a value that's kind of outside of the norm from what we're used to seeing within our data. This gives us the opportunity to dive into it a little deeper. One value add that I love about box plots, I rarely will present this in front of stakeholders unless I know that they have some sort of analysis background. Maybe it's an analyst or someone on the working level, but I would never present a box plot to, say, a CEO of a company. This isn't the type of information and analysis that you would want to put in front of them to consume. You kind of want to do your own analysis on this and then bring those insights from it and then incorporate that and tell that story in a different way. Another value add that I like to do with box plots is jitter it. And there's a very easy way you can do this. If you double click into the column shelf, there's actually a secret function in Tableau called random. You won't find it listed in the data dictionary within Tableau or the calculation dictionary. But if you type random with open brackets and then hit enter, it's going to jitter all of those dots randomly across the x-axis here. So you can see if I can kind of increase the size of those. This is the same data. They're literally in the same points. They've just now been kind of distributed randomly across our x-axis here. We can see anywhere between 0 and 1. And what this allows us to do is it gives the user the ability to kind of roll over each of these, especially if we're working with a lot of data. It's very hard to kind of just work within that line that everything is kind of, lined up on that single value on the x-axis. So this kind of spreads it out a bit so we can take a look at it and do a deeper analysis within our view. Also looks really good, especially if we have a ton of data points. Let me see if I can just quickly demonstrate what that would look like. Maybe let me drop customer name here. So you can see here, once I have that, maybe I can tone down the color on it a bit. So we can start seeing some transparency, and maybe I'll add some borders around those dots. So you can see it kind of starts looking really cool when we implement some things like that within our view, especially if we're building out a community project and stuff like that. I always see these kinds of analysis in those. The next thing within the analytics pane in the summarize section is totals. And this one I will breeze through because I stay away from it as much as possible. But this is where we're adding totals to some sort of crosstab view. So we can add it to a total for each of the dimensions. So you can see here, it kind of subtotals out each dimension as we roll through. Gives us grand totals. If I drag this onto the view, you can see I have it by grand total. I can add subtotals if I have multiple levels here, and row grand totals. If you pivot the way that this data is structured, if you want to incorporate it in the rows, you can see now that my column grand total is no longer an option I can choose. I can only choose the row grand total. So that's just some quick tips on adding totals. I typically will do it through the analysis tab up here in the main nav. You can add column and row grand totals as well as subtotals. So again, just multiple ways you can do things within Tableau, but I find using the analytics pane for something like that is much easier than trying to go through here. It's just less clicks. Next, we start getting into the modeling. And within the model section of the analytics pane, this is where we can start to really open up on some very powerful analytics that are built directly natively within Tableau, and we can incorporate them into our view. I'll start with a simple one. It's just calculating the average with a 95% confidence interval around it. This is an absolutely fantastic thing to do, especially if you're just diving into the data for the first time, is to calculate out these confidence intervals, because it kind of gives you an idea of the volatility of your data. If those confidence intervals are very wide, your data is probably all over the place, comes in rather randomly if you think about the way your data is coming in and being processed. And that could just be an effect of the business that you're working with or your industry, the data you have available. But it could be signs of, things going wrong and haywire within your ETL process. Maybe you need to look at the data and how it's coming into your databases more. There's just all kinds of insight that you can do from a very simple analysis like this. Now, the confidence interval, what this is showing us here is drawing the average. And if we go back to our summarize, when I drug in the average line from the summarize section, this is the same average it calculated. It's calculating an average across the table. It's 47,858, but it's also calculating an upper and lower bound confidence interval with a 95% confidence. What that's telling us is if we kept getting data, if all else stays the same and we're not making any changes to outside elements, in theory, if we kept getting data, that average is going to continually fall with 95% confidence between those upper and lower bounds. So as we all know, if we add another data point to this data set, that average is going to recalculate and it's going to show us a new average. And that new statistic is going to fall within those upper and lower bounds 95% of the time. To make that in a little bit more layman term, if we were to get 100 new data points, let's say we went 100 months into the future, days into the future, whatever our granularity is for our data set, if we went 100 periods forward, 95% of the time, or 95 of those 100 times, that average is probably going to get calculated in between those confidence intervals that we have right now within our data. 5% of the time, it might fall outside of those. But that's just kind of a way to think about it and maybe explain it to your stakeholders. The next one is the median with 95% confidence. And again, you can see this is the same concept, but it's wrapping that median with the 95% confidence interval here. Now, one analysis that I do religiously, no matter what data I'm coming into, if it's the first time I'm taking a look at specific data, I'll typically just throw this together real quick. This is dropping the average and the median with 95% confidence interval into the same view. And we're left with something like this. And this is a great way to start understanding the distribution of your data to see if you have any skewness going on or if there's any major outliers that you need to take care of. If there are major outliers, you can see here the median and average are a little bit beyond each other. If there's major outliers, those statistics start getting wider and wider apart. And if it gets to the point where our confidence intervals for each statistic are no longer overlapping, there's probably something that you need to look at within your data to take care of, especially if we started moving into some of these more advanced models that I'm about to talk about, like trending and forecasting and clustering. You definitely need to understand the distribution of your data to, understand those models and what's going into them to see if they're even calculating out accurate scores. So as an analyst, it's definitely our responsibility to go through here and just do a quick analysis like this to kind of get a lay of the land. There's other ways we can look at outliers. Again, I just showed you the box plot, another very simple view you can slap together. And we did see that there was one outlier in there that we might need to take a look at and investigate. But just looking at this analysis in a silo, I would say that because those confidence intervals are still overlapping, the average and median line are still relatively close to one another, I wouldn't necessarily dive into this and make any kind of more additional analysis against the outliers or look for anything. This seems pretty normal, nothing to be alarmed about, in my opinion. We can also see that some of our latest data points, we are kind of trending this upward momentum, and those are kind of dragging that average up potentially. So there's all of those things to consider. But again, very simple view we can slap together directly from the analytics pane. Takes us no time at all. Now, the next item in here in the modeling section is called trend line. And to me, trend line, it just doesn't do it justice on actually what's being done underneath the hood in Tableau. This is actually some very advanced regression models that are being calculated for you with no time at all. So you can kind of understand your data and some of the modeling behind it, make some assumptions on your data. You can also start getting into predictions with your data using these models, the trend line. So we can see here, if I drag trend line into my view, it's giving us these 5 options. And what I love about Tableau is it's all very visual. So even if you're not very heavily involved in statistics or statistical analysis, if it's something that maybe you're interested in or learning more about, this is a very low barrier to entry to kind of get some of those initial things. You don't even have to code anything or Python and R. You can simply just drop these models in. It also gives us visual cues on which model will fit what type of data better. So looking at this, if I look at kind of this linear model here, you can see the data points are in that scatter plot, and it's kind of moving, from the bottom left up to the top right. Your data is kind of moving in that linear direction. So maybe that model, you might play with that first to see if it fits your data better. Then we can see, exponential, if it's kind of starting off in the lower left and then working its way up exponentially up to the top. Maybe we should incorporate that model. And then polynomial is another option. If your data kind of has the seasonality effect, you want some curvature within that trend line to reflect that, that's probably going to be the model that fits the data the best. For now, I'm just going to leave it on trend line, and I'm going to talk to you about some things. If we hover over our trend line, we get a bunch of crazy stuff here. But in reality, it's giving us a very simple formula for a regression model where it says sales equal, it gives us a constant value, times it by the month of order date, and then it has another constant value. This is essentially your slope line that calculates out what this linear trend line is doing. It also gives us some other very basic statistics here, R squared and our p-value. Our p-value is used by statisticians to kind of gauge the statistical significance of your model. I would say your p-value can be what you're shooting for. It can vary depending on the type of data that you're looking at. For sales data and your typical everyday kind of statistical analysis, it's kind of an industry standard to have a p-value if it's below 0.05. then you're statistically significant. If you're working with, let's say data in healthcare, for instance, maybe you want to be a little bit more statistically significant. So you might increase your p-value, or decrease the p-value number that would be the statistical significance. So it just depends on your personal analysis. The R-squared, that figure is telling us it's a value that's between 0 and 1. And what it's telling us is 25% of the model that's being shown here in the data, it makes up about, or explains about 25% of this model. That means there's about 75% of stuff out there that is not included within our model, but is influencing our data. That could be marketing. It could be the way we're marketing our products. It could be the inventory of our products. It could be market competition. There's all kinds of things that you can think about that our sales would be influenced by that we're not bringing into this particular analysis. So that's kind of our gauge to see how much of our model is being explained. 25% is probably what you're going to see a lot in the real world. If you're using data from like data.world or doing your own kind of data analysis with data that's been kind of curated for you, you'll probably see R-squared values at much higher rates. But if I were to get a 25% R-squared, I'd say that's pretty decent in a business or for business data. But let's take a look at those two values and let's compare two models. So if I have my linear model here, it's drawn this linear trend, but I do see some seasonality, some curvature to my data. I would say like maybe within these months here, this is a pretty static, but as we move forward, we can see that our data is actually kind of moving up to the top left or top right of our canvas here. So let's take a look at these two values and just, again, record them in our mind real quick. So we have 0.00285 as our p-value and an R-squared of about 25. But let's look and see what happens when I draw a polynomial model on here. So we can see here, if I hover back over where it says sales equals and then all of those values, we have a much more complicated regression that's happening here. It's throwing in some cubes and some squares. And this is what's giving that line curvature. If you're thinking of back to just developing a simple linear line, it's just mx plus 1, and it will give you some sort of line, right? But this is going to add that curvature shape to it. So we're bringing in some cubed figures and things like that. But let's go back to our R-squared and p-value. We can see here my R-squared, it's saying that this model is actually explaining more of what's happening here. So it's introducing some more seasonality. So it is explaining more of our data. We can see it's up to about 32 or 0.32, 32%. And we can see our p-value went from 0.00285 to 0.0004672. So it did increase a little bit, which isn't necessarily good, but we're still beneath that kind of 0.05 threshold. So we can still say that this model is statistically significant, and it's explaining more about our data. So I would actually lean towards using this model over the linear line. And that might be very complex if I'm explaining it like that. But at the same time, if we think about it logically, right, I've added some curvature to this model. Logically, I have seasonality within my sales data, depending on which month. So it makes sense to explain that data like that. If we also think of it very simply, just like I was saying, just very visually, if I drop this line, I'll just remove. Again, if I just look at my line chart here, and I can see visually that around this point, it's kind of flat. There's no, we have seasonality, yes, depending on the month, but we're not moving in any type of direction. If I drop that model back on it, you can see it kind of explains that same thing that we're seeing visually. It goes up in the beginning, it kind of stalls out year over year. We're kind of getting the same values. And then we start to see this upward momentum and kind of building up kind of almost exponentially here at this point. So this model definitely explains our data much better than the linear line would. I think that's all I want to cover with linear trend lines and some of this modeling or regressions, if you will. But let's jump into the forecasting. Underneath the hood, forecast is a very simple analysis you can add. You can add it to any kind of trend line over time. And what it will do is it's going to add in an estimated value, and it's going to show this on color. And it's actually interesting. Tableau adds this model to your color property within your marks card. So you can see it's adding this forecasted model or forecast indicator directly here within kind of an aesthetics attribute within your marks card. I always found that very interesting. But it does separate it out. It gives us our actuals. It forecasts some period in time, and we can actually set that period. And underneath the hood, Tableau is using a forecasting model called exponential smoothing. And what I love about this is there's multiple models within kind of that concept. There's actually about 8 different models that Tableau runs underneath the hood, and it chooses the best one to fit your data. And you can actually go through and view all of those models yourself within Tableau. So if I right click on our forecasted or estimated values, we can see some new things in our menu. One is this forecast. And if I hover over forecast within our menu, I get forecast options and describe the forecast. If I describe the forecast, it gives us this statistical summary, which gives us some, statistical values. Maybe we're looking at our, AIC or whatever we want to take a look at to see if this is good. But it also tells us a little bit more about the model. So you can see here, it tells us at what level, the model trend, and the season. These are all values that you can set within Tableau to build out this forecast yourself to test the other models. So if I go back into our menu and go to forecast options, you can see here at the top, this is where we can set how many periods in the future. So right now it's set to 12, but if I wanted to make that, say, 8, I can reduce it. I can move it up. I can change it by quarter, by month, by week, whatever. You have a lot of flexibility there. And what's great about it is it's very instantaneous. If we're thinking of doing something like this in R or Python, you're going to have to comb through the code and find where you need to change those parameters. But this is just a simple, up and down. It's all built into the UX. It's great. The other thing we can do is down here where it says forecast model. It's set to automatic. And this is where it's running through those different models and picking out the best one that represents your data. You can actually drop this down and go to custom. And remember back to where when I was in the statistical summary, we had trend and we had season. This is where I can start changing those parameters, and it's actually changing the algorithm or the calculation underneath the hood that calculates out this forecast. So you can see I can change all of these values. We'll start seeing some things happen. Sometimes it says you can't calculate a forecast using those parameters. Other times it's just going to give us a linear line, and we can automatically see that, Tableau is doing it justice. If I reset these parameters, this is probably a better representation of what our forecasted data would be compared to just a linear line drawn based on some averages. So changing these parameters, again, is a great way to kind of understand what Tableau is trying to do. And it's a great way to kind of understand the forecasting models underneath the hood and how they're being calculated on your data. Another thing I love about this is it gives us this very clear description of what's being done here. And you can use this verbiage and actually add to it, tweak it a little bit. And this is a great way to, or at least the foundational way that you can take this and explain the data and the model in very layman terms to your stakeholders. So, if you brought this in front of the CEO of some company, the first thing they're going to ask is, how are you calculating out this stuff? This is a great way to, at least a good place to start, to explain that in a very easy way. So, they can buy into the change or the story that you're trying to tell or convey with the data. Because a lot of times with these statistical analysis, that's where we run into trouble, is it's doing great stuff. This is all fantastic work. It's pretty accurate, depending on your data. but presenting it to someone, it's that buy-in from our stakeholders that we typically that's the trouble that we get into with statistical analysis. So if you can bring it in and do it in a visual way and speak to it and have confidence in the models, you're better to have buy-in, especially if you present in a visual format like this. If I brought this in an Excel table, you might not have, the credibility that a data visualization would bring to the analysis if I brought this in Excel. The last model I'll touch on is clustering. And this is, again, very easy. Underneath the hood, Tableau is using a model called K-means. Again, it adds that model directly to one of our aesthetic properties here, or the color property to be exact. It's going to change the color of these marks in the view depending on the cluster it assigns. So you can see here it has 4 clusters that it's calculated out automatically. Again, Tableau is very easy to use. I can come in here and I can actually edit that cluster. I can change the variables that I wanted to the cluster to be calculated on. I can change the number of clusters. Let's say if I wanted 10 segments of my data to look at or segment out 10 different groups of customers that I wanted to market to in very specific formats. I can do that in like 5 seconds using Tableau, looking at our customer names and giving it the variables that would be most meaningful for that calculation. As you see here, I can define all that very simply within the UX. And again, just like I said, use cases for clustering, customer segmentation is a great one. If you're trying to understand any kind of grouping within your data, it could be product segmentation, how you want to market individual products, how you want to market your products to different groups of customers. This is a great way, or at least a great place to start. And exporting out this data is very easy as well. You could just simply highlight all these marks and export out the data directly from or directly from Tableau. This way you can pass it off to a marketing team. Maybe they can load that data into another tool where they can define those groups better. All of those things can be done directly from here. The last section I'll cover is custom. And this is where we can really start doing some really cool stuff. So Tableau builds out, like I just mentioned, some very powerful statistical analysis, statistical tools and models directly within our view. But within this custom section, it gives us the ability to build any type of model that we want and define it visually directly from Tableau. So let's say I wanted to build out some models that looked at outliers. I can start bringing in these reference lines. Let me go ahead and clear this stuff too, so you guys can see a little better. But from my analytics pane, I can bring in some of these values. And if I drop in reference line, you can see it presents me with those options again here at the top left of the canvas. And again, I can aggregate it in different sections. I can add it to both the X and Y axes or independent. For now, I'm just going to add this across my Y axis on sum of sales, and it brings up this edit reference line band or box. What's great about this, like I said, it allows you and gives you the ability to add any custom calculation, custom model that you want to Tableau to be visualized in your data. So if I am thinking of just a simple line chart, I can calculate out these statistics. I can actually build out calculations or parameters and add them directly to the marks card and bring in those new calculations or parameters. Again, if you know the algorithm you want inside of your view, you can simply just create a calculated field for it and drop it right here within this custom line or custom reference band or distribution. To show you an example of that, I'm going to switch over to distribution, and you can see that Tableau gives us these computations that we can implement that will draw distribution banding. So it's 60% of the average, 80% of the average. I can come in here, I can customize those percentages. Let's say I wanted to add in 100. It's going to add that to this analysis as well. But some of the most powerful things, I think, are some of the standard deviation methods in here. So you can see I can select a distribution band between plus or minus 1 standard deviation of our sample average. And it's going to add those directly into my views. Now I can see anything that falls in between those things. Based on this data, we can also start creating calculated fields and using some of our aesthetics here within our marks card to very easily identify and visualize things like outliers, different things of opportunity that the business could take a look at and take advantage of. And to show you an example of that, I've built out this workbook here. But within this dashboard, this is essentially the exact same thing we were looking at. It's a outlying detection model, and it's using the standard deviation. So I'm looking at plus or minus 2 standard deviations, plus or minus 1 standard deviation. And you can see I've added these labels here. So anything that falls in within this distribution band makes up about 68% of our data. Anything within this outer band makes up almost about 95% of the data. So again, very simple labeling for our stakeholders so they can understand what's in our data. Then I can use, coloring and formatting within Tableau and build out these custom calculations to add in some visual cues for the user to see where there's bad anomalies, for instance, where our profit is low, and good anomalies where our profit is good or above where we would expect it to be. So we can see here in these months, we're actually falling above that 95% of the data. And looking at this actually makes a lot of sense. There's about 100 marks on the view. If we go back to what I was talking about with that kind of 95% confidence interval, this isn't exactly that. However, if we think 95% of our data is held within those two bands, we have about 4 marks that fall outside of that out of 100 marks. It just makes a lot of sense visually. So that's kind of a quick QA of our data and our model that it's working. And then we can add in all kinds of custom models. So let me see if I brought those in as well. Let me switch over to this then. So here's the workbook. It's actually in Tableau Public if you guys want to go and check it out. It's on Play for Data's Tableau Public, where we post all of our blog content and some of these supplemental workbooks that you guys can download. You can rip out all this stuff and use it in your own workbooks. But I've added 3 different models here. So you can see the standard deviation. We can detect outliers with the median with quartiles. So again, it's kind of using those standard deviation banding to identify that stuff. We think back to our median with quartile example in the previous workbook. Again, that makes about 50% of the data here. There's our median line, everything else outside of that. And then we have, these values that fall outside of, this parameter that we've set here. This is using a Z-score test. So again, this is just a different model. Anything that's above 2 points that's being calculated by the scoring would be considered an outlier in this model. So we can see I've highlighted that using conditional formatting. So there's all kinds of ways that you can use those custom options within the analytics pane to build out these custom models and custom views. I am going to close with that and open it up to questions. Let me hop back over here. And here's some of my contact information as well. My email address, if you wanted to reach out to me directly, follow me on Twitter. It's theDataVeteran.com or theDataVeteran.com. Don't go there. I don't know what's there. My Twitter handle is @theDataVeteran. And then here's my LinkedIn address. It's just Ethan-Lang. If you like this content, if statistics is something that interests you, I am going to do a selfless plug here. I'm in the process of writing a book for O'Reilly. It's called Statistical Tableau. It actually just went to what O'Reilly calls early release. And this is where you can go in and view the content that I'm writing unedited. It's not gone through any technical review. It's literally in the raw, unedited. They've basically copied and pasted out of Google Docs directly within their platform. So if you're an O'Reilly subscriber, you can view this content. The book is set to be published. It says the publication is September 2024. Right now, it's actually on pace to being published at the end of this year, so December of 23. So be on the lookout for this. If you follow me on my any of my social channels, I'll be talking about it. This is actually the first time I'm publicly announcing that the book is in works. But a lot of these concepts in a lot of these, visual formats and the things that I was talking about, the fundamentals from this presentation will be covered in more detail within this book. Sorry, I know I said questions. Opening up for questions now.
That was so great, Ethan. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited for you. I'm so excited about the book. You heard it here first, Tampa Tug people. There is a question. David asked, how did you use or configure the conditional formatting for the color on the last slide? I'm assuming the above and below values. I said, I think it's probably with an if statement in a calculated field, but maybe you have a better way than I do.
I'll dive into that a little bit more. So just like I said, all of those parameters and stuff, it's all being used in calculated fields. So even if we looked at that Z-score test, that's a statistical model that's not native within Tableau, but I have the fundamental understanding of how it's being calculated. So I can write a calculated field to describe what it is, and it calculates out Z-scores. It's the same thing with some of this conditional formatting. If I look here, I have this detection. So if I look that up, if I can spell, here we go. So I did use an if statement for this, and it's actually being calculated using window average and window standard deviation functions on my profit value. So if anything, if the window average falls below kind of that standard deviation that I'm calculating here, the 2, or excuse me, it's actually on the 1, then I'm considering it a bad anomaly and it will highlight it a different color. If it falls above, that standard deviation in the table, then I'm highlighting it as a good anomaly. And if it's not any of those two things, it's just highlighting as expected. So it kind of grays out. And then to show you an example of the Z-score, this is it's a very simple calculation, but if you understand the algorithm, you can write a simple calculated field within Tableau that will describe some of these models and do that. For instance, I could write a linear regression model that will calculate out that linear line the same way that Tableau has it built out natively within the Analytics pane, if you have kind of the fundamental understanding of the calculations. But that's it.
And then Greg had a question. You know how if you have a dual axis, the reference lines will have 2 labels, like it'll say average on the right and on the left. He's asking how to get rid of those additional labels.
Good question. Let's see, because I'm pretty sure I have them both on mine.
I think I know the answer.
Go for it if you know. Go ahead.
Oh, I think if you right click on the reference line that you want to edit, I think you can go in there and, oh, wait, maybe not.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a way to do it.
When I have 1, because I won't want the word average. I'll want the value or something. That's what I'm thinking. I'm sorry, Greg. Not the genius I thought I was.
Yeah, I can't think of it off the top of my head. Surely there is a way to do it. But what Greg is essentially describing, I've broken my dual axes here. So I have the line chart up top, and then those dots that I'm using for the conditional formatting is down here. What Greg is describing, or the problem that he's presented, is if I dual axes those things, and let me synchronize that. You'll see it has a label here for the reference lines that I'm using on this axis, and then a label on the other. Maybe something simple I could do. Let's try this. Let me just try removing these. I'll remove those. Oh, shoot, it removes them from both. Fantastic. Okay. One very hacky way that I can think of. There's a hacky way you can do this. If you wanted to, you could create each of these individually.
Yep.
One with the banding, one without. And then using a transparent sheet, essentially, you could drop them on to the view together and then just put the circles on top of your line and make sure they line up exactly with your layout pane using kind of floating containers. That would be the very like hacky way that
That's
you
like
could
the
get
last
by.
resort way.
I can think of an even hackier way to do it.
Oh,
And hi,
really?
this is Elisa Davis. And if
Hey.
I had to, I would just float a blank box over the marks and have it match the background color. So you're basically putting a Post-it over it.
Yeah, there you go.
I think that's even hackier than two charts perfectly
sure.
aligned.
Definitely.
So there are a lot of ways to solve these problems, and I find I just like over time will discover either on my own or someone else will point out a better way. But I mean that's part of the appeal of Tableau. It's so flexible in that way.
Totally.
Definitely. I agree.
Let's see. Let me see if I have any more questions. I don't think so. Okay. Thank you, Ethan. That was great. I'm so excited to read your book.
Yeah. I'm excited when it's going to be done.
Yeah, I know book writing is a process. Next up, we have Elisa Davis. I'll let her introduce herself and tell you all about herself. But I want to mention that she won the Michael Christiani award for community award for community. Anyway, huge award at the Viz at Tableau conference recently. Just in case she was not going to toot her own horn, I'm telling you about it. Okay, Lisa, it's all yours.
All right. Can you guys see me?
No.
Okay. I don't know why. Let me start and stop again. Still no. All right. Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Then I will just share my screen. Yep, we'll go entire screen and you can look at what I'm talking about. Entire screen. I know that's dangerous. Oh, I can't share it. I can't share the entire screen. Maybe I have to do a window. That'll work. All right. Cool. So thank you so much, Nicole, and hey to the Tampa Bay user group. I see that it's a smaller group today, so I'll make this more of an informal session. If you have questions, since I'm sharing my screen, Nicole, I can't see the questions, but feel free to pipe up and interrupt me as I go. As Nicole mentioned, my name is Elisa Davis. I've been using Tableau for about 5 years. I have been active in the Tableau community for coming up on about 2 years. And since I started doing work in public, it's really transformed my career and in a lot of ways my life. So one of the things that has happened is that I became a co-lead of the newly created project Back to Viz Basics. Viz Basics will be 2 years old this Thanksgiving. It's an amazing project and it's most of what I'm here to talk to you guys about today. As Nicole mentioned, we're just coming off the Tableau conference where I talked about Back to Viz Basics a hell of a lot. We had the opportunity to tag along with Taha and Harveen on Intro to Tableau Public as a great way to get started putting your work out there. And then we hosted our first ever Back to Viz Basics live session, which was super exciting for me personally because I got to meet some of the people whose work we see every other week. including some of our Japanese participants, and they've got a little support, like they've got a group going where they meet up every week or every other week to work on Tableau upskilling. And so all 4 of the people who did all of 100% of the Back to Viz Basics prompts last year were from that group, and I got to meet some of them. So that was really fun and exciting. I also got a couple chances to talk in front of a camera about why the Tableau community is awesome and how to get involved. And as Nicole mentioned, I was absolutely floored to win the Michael Christiani Community Leadership Award. I had some hint that I might be up for a Vizzy, which if you're not familiar with those, they're 100% community nominated and community led events. They happen every year, and anyone can nominate up to 10 people per category. It's a free text field, which is an absolute disaster for Matt Francis, who hand dedupes them every year. But I thought that I might be, nominated, or I might have a shot at biggest growth or something like that. So, I've commented to some of my other winners that they're the only one who was surprised that they took home the trophy in that particular category, and I think they would say the same thing to me. But it's just a huge honor. So that's a little bit about me. Oh, and I'm currently a lead business intelligence analyst for Discover Financial Services. I got into Tableau doing fundraising analytics at the University of Nevada, Reno, and actually had a year-long gap in my professional Tableau career where there was some leadership transitions, and then I took a position where I thought I would get to Tableau, but I didn't. And so Tableau Public actually bridged a 1-year gap when I did not get to Viz for work and helped me get back into it. So that's me. This is my Tableau Public profile. I started working on it way back in the day, and I started out with Chantilly Jaggernoth runs a Millennials and Data Bootcamp. So I knew that I needed some structure and some specific homework assignments to start building out my Tableau Public portfolio. I thought I was upskilling to prepare for a job search, and that did happen, but then so much more happened as well. So my personal story is that I was getting to the end of the boot camp and looking for a community project to transition over to keep kind of practicing my skills, building my portfolio. And the timing here was absolutely perfect because as Millennials and Data was winding down, Back to Viz Basics was just getting started. So I was already in an every other week kind of cadence. And Eric Balash, who founded Back to Viz Basics, was also involved in Millennials and Data. So the stars more or less aligned perfectly. So I committed to doing all of the Back to Viz Basics, and I did. I kept it up. There was the first one, the second, week 2. I kept it up all the way until the Tableau conference when I met Eric and was like, gee, running a community project all on your own kind of seems like a lot. Have you thought about adding a co-lead? I was already doing feedback on Twitter at that point, and we decided to give it a go. The rest is history. So backing up to what is the project? The project was founded because Eric, a couple of things happened at once. One is that the Tableau student guide was passed over to Eric, and he wanted to put his own spin on it. If you're not familiar with the Tableau student guide, it was created because there was kind of a lack of a one-stop shop. There's tons of information out there on how to learn Tableau, but it's all over the place. It's not super centralized, and it's very easy to go looking for information and end up more overwhelmed than you started. So the Tableau student guide was created to centralize kind of a quick start guide. When Eric took it over, it was when Makeover Monday was on a hiatus. He looked around at the landscape of community projects and thought, these are all wonderful and none of them are super beginner friendly. So let's work on that. So the deal about Back to Viz Basics is that we publish a data set every other week. It is on data.world. And is this going to be the student guide? It is. Back to Viz Basics Live. So everything that you need to know about Back to Viz Basics, you can get to from the tracker. That's why I've got this pulled up. And I dropped it over in the chat. And this is what I consider to be the homepage of the project. You can see all of the challenges that we've ever posted here, and you can link to everything that you need. So we drop a challenge, and the prompt, the structure is the same every time. There will be data set that we've found for you, which we do our absolute best to make sure is approachable and not overwhelming. And then there will be a fairly specific, narrow prompt that you can focus on. So who is it for? It's for everybody who wants to practice using Tableau. Even if you just download it, take a swing at it locally, you don't publish it or do anything, it's still a really great workout. I think about it like it's easy enough for beginners, but one of the beauties of the flexibility of Tableau is that there's 20 different ways to do everything. So when we have more experienced participants, we see them using the data set as a jumping off point. If you already know how to, create a ranked table, then you might pick up some of the enhancements that Autumn and Luke were sharing at Tableau Conference. If you already know how to use show hide, you might incorporate dynamic zone visibility. So for build a box and whisker plot, it's everything from people using show me, and I include myself in that category. I still had to pull up show me to find out how to build a box and whisker plot. And you have everything from that to Mr. Kevin Wee. Let's see, build a box and whisker plot was week 4. And Kevin Wee is not going to be way up high, is he? You know what? I think it got Viz of the Day. It did. And what he did for this was use dynamic zone visibility to visualize every way that you could do a box and whisker plot. If you click on these little icons to learn more about the chart, it expands, gives him a little overview. So it's everything from your first box and whisker plot to kind of like pushing the bounds of the tool. Then what? Then you submit the viz to our tracker, linked to right here. And then ideally also you would go over and post about it on Twitter. I think this is where the fun really starts. People have different feelings about Twitter, which is totally fine. I was a reluctant joiner back in the day 2 years ago, but it's really the water cooler of the Tableau community. And what happens over on Twitter is if you post it and you say feedback welcome, I will do my best. There's me. I will do my best to make sure that you get at least one response to your post looking for feedback. I've been doing this for about a year, a little more than a year, And it's been a huge learning experience for me. And this is a pretty typical, Risa is one of our 100% participants right now, and she always says feedback welcome. Her portfolio is a great one to check out if you want to see the kind of growth that you can experience through just regular practice. And so this is pretty typical feedback. Although she did an amazing job, so it gets harder and harder to give feedback as people get more experience, but I will still take a swing at it. So, but my general format is I try to pick out something that I think is working particularly well for this unique interpretation of the data set, and then make a couple of actionable suggestions that you might actually go back to a finished project to complete. And that I think would make the visualization clearer or more effective. And a lot of the time it's fairly similar stuff, like formatting, axis lines. Sometimes it's, if there's interactivity, I'll call out that it's very helpful to tell us that there is interactivity, or a little bit more about how the interactivity works. If you don't want feedback, that's also totally fine. I completely get that sometimes you're just putting yourself out there, getting it done is enough, and moving on. So I think for intermediate to advanced users, I'll also plug that it's a lot like yoga. Practicing the basics is for everyone. Your first class, at a beginner class, you might just be learning sun salutations. And then as you come back to it and get further into the practice, you're thinking about, alignment. You're thinking about connecting the flows. You're thinking about sort of, it's the same motions, but you're coming back to them in a very different way in your level of experience. So, yeah. I loved Viz Basics as a participant. It was the backbone of the portfolio that got me my new job. And I love it as a leader because it's a really friendly and welcoming community, and everybody who does it consistently has massive skill growth. So that's really satisfying, and it's fun to give back. So I will stop there for now. And any questions?
So feel free to type your questions in the chat, or if you're able to, you can unmute yourself, but I don't know if you're able. Actually, I think you can, but someone can try it and let me know for sure. Yeah, Back to Viz Basics is one of those projects that I think will help you build the skills you need for actual work. And Workout Wednesday is like that too, but Workout Wednesday is harder and less accessible maybe than Back to Viz Basics, although there's a page of Workout Wednesdays that are I think it's called Workout Wednesday Essentials. I learned about this recently. That are a little bit easy. I didn't know about them, I swear, until like 2 weeks ago. But
I still feel intimidated by Workout Wednesdays.
Me too. I said I was going to start doing it like 3 times, and I've done 2 of them in a year. So
yeah. And
David is
I think another thing that distinguishes Viz Basics from Workout Wednesday is that it's fundamental skill sets, but you're kind of putting your own spin on the data.
Yeah, totally.
There's a huge, it's still kind of bite-sized, but we really see a wide variety of submissions.
Yeah, it's not as fun when you have to do the same exact viz as everyone else. I think that's part of my resistance to it. But David has a real question. He says, how can we have massive skill growth with Back to Viz Basics if we're still struggling to learn how to use Tableau? Many times I'm lost and I don't know how to do the things. I don't know how to do things, so I have to ask for help. Excuse me for my bad reading. I'll let you take the first stab. My first inclination is to post your question on Twitter.
Yeah. Sometimes, when we're talking about a specific skill, we'll link a blog post. A lot of the times you can find answers for sort of the very fundamentals of how would I build a chart type in the Tableau knowledge base. It's a
Which is
fantastic
not super
resource.
duper user friendly. I will.
Fair.
And it's hard to find things.
And then I would also say that take advantage of the fact that a lot of workbooks on Tableau Public are downloadable. So if you're not sure how to do something, like even something as simple as build a bar chart, a lot of the times you can pop the hood on someone else's Viz and just looking at where they put the different pills, you can get an idea of how you would start to do something. And then again, if you can track, if you're opening, yeah, the Flairledge twins have answered basically everything.
Yeah. Between the
That's
Flairledge twins and Andy Kriebel. So
yeah.
I know there are a lot of bad sources of knowledge as well as good sources of knowledge. So I'm going to try to drop a few things in the chat, David, that are definitely good ones.
SQL Bell,
Oh,
Donna
yeah.
Bell Santos does amazing tutorials.
On YouTube.
I would also shout out SQL Seku, especially if you're coming from another data viz tool. He does some comparisons between how would I build this in Power BI versus how would I build this in Tableau that are pretty
Oh,
fantastic.
I didn't know he did that.
Yeah. I'm not sure if he's done as many recently, but yeah, I would say my best tip is to look through some of the ones that have been done previously and kind of see how they did it. And a good way to do that, let's see. Back to Viz Basics requires us to search for answers. Yes, and like that's part of, so when we're designing the prompts, that's part of what we're thinking about as we match up data sets and topics. Sometimes we start with a topic that we want to do and we look for a data set to go with it. Sometimes we will start with a data set and try to figure out like what would it be good to go with, if that makes sense. And so it'll only be one skill every other week. And if you're newer, there's no deadline. We start to see the first submissions coming in, usually about a week after we drop the prompt. And you can look at what other people have done, get inspired, like look at the Viz to see how they do that. And I think we've got time, so I'll actually demo how you would do that.
Yes, we do have time.
If I can find a window. So. Okay,
and I actually think that's a super valuable thing to demo.
Perfect. So how would we do this? Again, I shared the link to the tracker, submission tracker, and I would not start with Kevin Wees. I would actually tend to stay away from. This one is even maybe a little bit fancier. So there's some cool stuff going on in this one. They've got spark lines, custom tooltips. This is a percent of total. So this is achieved using a dual axis. It's great. It's fancier than I would be looking for if I was just getting started. So let's keep going. Natalie. Perfect. This looks great. So then, let's see, make a copy. So you can stay here in web edit and sheet 1, sheet 2, and just see how she has done this. So looking at the data set, we've got year was reformatted. She's got a title in the worksheet, and all she's done is taken purpose over here to columns and average percent over here to rows. So that's why like I happen to know that there are five-ish years in this data set. If you wanted to see that, oh, it looks like she drilled it out a little bit more over here and then decided not to use it. So that's also super helpful. You can kind of see people's thought process with the tabs that don't make it to the final dashboard. And so if you wanted to recreate this on your own, you would take, sum of percent over here. She's got purpose. She's got year. Year is blue here, so that means it's being treated as a categorical variable, which is how you get the bar charts. If it was green, we can even, flip over from discrete to continuous, and it's going to, oh, it smushes them together. That's crazy. Sometimes it makes it, turns it into a line chart automatically. Basically, just playing around with the data is how you learn how to do Tableau. Like it still does
Honestly,
crazy
that's
stuff that I
exactly
don't.
it. I'm not even kidding. I would move. Let me see if I move this blue thing over here. Let me see if
Right?
I put this on color. Honestly,
Yeah.
just be super curious about what you're not going to break it. So be super curious about what you can do if you put this measure here and this dimension here and switch them or put both of them here. And you'll start to discover maybe something no one has done before, or maybe somebody hasn't done it that way before. But I've definitely made charts that I didn't know what they were called because I was playing around.
Right. And I'll also say, like, it took me forever to figure out how to make a dang bar chart in Tableau because I kept like not changing the mark type. So I would drop something that made a
Oh yeah,
little
that's another
bar, and then I would
thing.
drop something on size, and then I would be like, why isn't this doing what I want it to do? So yeah.
Like I tell people when they're asking me about learning Tableau, like it is a higher learning curve than a lot of tools, but you can do so much more with it. And if you're
Mhm.
looking at your career being related to data visualization or data analytics, it's a more valuable skill in dollars.
Mm. Yeah.
Than say something like Power BI is up there too. As much as I don't love Power BI, I will admit that that's also a very valuable skill. But compared to something like Tibco Spotfire, Click, QuickSight, etc. All of the low code data visualization tools that I know of, learn Tableau or Power BI or both.
Mhm. And I would say that like a benefit to learning Tableau is that we have such a strong community thinking about design and communication and storytelling.
Oh yeah.
So it's not just can we visualize the data, it's how can we visualize the data. And these lessons are tool agnostic ultimately.
Oh yeah, so if you
And then
wanted to do back to Viz Basics in Python with Plotly, go for
totally,
it.
totally. I don't know how
I don't know how you submit
submitting
it.
it to the
Oh,
tracker. Yeah, I guess you could still submit it to
you
the tracker. It's just linked to the
could take
Viz.
a screenshot and put the screenshot as a background in a dashboard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think Tableau has its strengths and weaknesses as compared to Power BI, and I really haven't started learning Power BI yet, even though it would probably be good to as a data viz professional.
Same Z's.
Just because I'm like, oh, but I spent a long time learning how to use this
Yep.
screwdriver,
So David,
you
you
know?
have the exact opposite problem of the one you're describing. Like you're saying you started to master Power BI and now you're frustrated with Tableau. Like I took one Power BI lesson and I'm like, I don't like this. I'm not doing it.
But I guess I'm getting to the point in my career where like I'm even frustrated about learning Figma because I already know how to do this stuff in the Adobe suite. So
Exactly. No, seriously, I learned Figma reluctantly at cart.com. One of the things that I took away from there that was really positive was, I finally learned Figma after using Illustrator for however long.
yeah. So I would say that like it is frustrating, and to the extent of like once you get your bearings, it will be easier. And one of the nice things about a project like Back to Viz Basics, as opposed to your proprietary internal data, is that you can show people exactly what you're trying to do and get help with it. Other resources that I'll mention, Michelle Freeman, Zach Geis, and the other Nicole Clausen, host Viz Office Hours every Wednesday.
And
I think it's every Wednesday.
It's every Wednesday, but the times alternate. It's in the morning one Wednesday and then in the afternoon another Wednesday. I'll grab the link.
So if you're super stuck either with design, inspiration, or how do I do this chart type, you have access to 2 visionaries and a Tableau ambassador in a tool agnostic session once a week if you can make the times work. And they alternate so that it works better for Pacific Coast versus East Coast in different weeks. The Tableau forums, people keep track of those pretty religiously.
Notwithstanding, there's great information in there.
And yeah. And like really, the data fam hangs out on Twitter. So if you get stuck with something and you tweet out a screenshot and a question of what you're stuck on, hashtag data fam, maybe at the project lead for whichever community project you're working on will either see it, get back to you, or tag in somebody who might be able to get to it faster or more thoroughly. So
I had a question one time at like 3 a.m. Eastern time, and someone answered it in like 3 minutes from like across the world. So that was
oh my God,
cool.
I love how global the data fam is. Like
I know.
sometimes if I'm up in the middle of the night, I'm like, I wonder what everybody's talking about.
Yeah, David is saying what he's doing now is joining as many Tableau user groups as possible. And he's just trying to just join, even if he has to stop working on things. And oh yeah, Twitter's blocked at work. That sucks. This is why I work for
Twitter's blocked at my work too. And I didn't use it personally. Pardon?
Probably at any big company it is.
Yeah. But I would say that if you don't use it personally now and you only ever tweet about Tableau, it's still worth joining because there are so many knowledgeable folks like hanging out there.
Another, I should plug this because A, I'm involved in it, and B, it's an alternative because I understand if you have a problem with Twitter from like an Elon Musk perspective, I mean,
yeah, for sure.
Get it.
It's not my favorite part about Twitter either.
The Data Visualization Society Slack has a tools -Tableau channel now. And you can join the Data Visualization Society for free. You have to be a member to be on the Slack, but the membership is free, despite the fact that I don't love membership only things necessarily. I'm one of the co-moderators with Steve Wexler, so I couldn't ask for a more like knowledgeable and celebrated co-moderator. And Kevin and Ken Flurlage and Zach, Data Plus loves Zach, not the other Zach.
Outers.
Bowders. Yes, Zach Bowders. I was thinking of the office hours Zach. I don't remember either of their last names.
That guys.
Yes. So there's the Data Viz Society's URL. If you go to members and join, there's a link to join Slack. Even if you only go in the Tableau channel, there's a lot of other interesting stuff on there. They're kind of formal, and at first it might seem not as accessible, but the Tableau channel is definitely very relaxed.
And I would say that the broader message is like find and or make a community,
right,
wherever that is for you. Because
okay, here's Viz office hours. I'm gonna make them a website. Google form, and this is how you sign up if you want to do it. Sign up like the day before or whatever. I think they don't really require much notice.
They really don't. I think you can even just like
you can even show up. I've done it. And Michelle and Nicole are not going to kick you out. They're so sweet.
They are.
And they're both so knowledgeable. Odd weeks, it's at 8 a.m. Eastern time, and even weeks, it's at 4 p.m. Eastern time. They even have all the time zones spelled out on this form for you. So if you're like me and time zone challenged, it's right there. So yeah, that Google form is probably the best source of information about them right now. I am going to make them a page. It'll take me 20 minutes. I'm going to be like, here's your new website.
Perfect. All right. Well, I see that some people are starting to drop off. So
we certainly do not need to fill any particular period of time. We all have.
But if people have questions, I want to encourage them to speak up.
Absolutely. Oh, so as you're dropping off, you'll get this in your email. Our next meeting is June 15th with Andy Cotgrave, the senior evangelist at Tableau.
What?
Yes, I just emailed him and was like, would you speak at our talk? He's like, okay.
And if you guys aren't familiar with Andy Cotgrave, he hosts the Iron Viz Championship and wears really fantastic outfits.
I know. I was like, you're going to need to be on camera. Thank you, Tab. Yeah, I was like, that's what I put in the event description. It's like, you may know him from Iron Viz.
Maybe.
Possibly.
You know, if you've heard of this little thing called Iron Viz.
Thank you so much, Elisa. It is always a delight to talk to you in real time. It is a delight also to talk to you on Twitter, but it's a nice change to talk to you for reals.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you so much for having me at the TUG. If you have questions for the attendees, if you have questions or follow-up thoughts as soon as we hang up, I get back to people fastest on Twitter, but I'm also around on LinkedIn. I have a website. It's elisadavis.com. It's pretty easy to track me down on the internet.
Yeah.
And
well, you can always get me and I'll get Elisa for you.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Nicole knows where to find me.
I'll find her.
Perfect.
Thanks so much, y'all.
Thank you.
You already have a DM, Lisa.
Yes.
We've
got a typo.
Everybody have a great day. I'll talk with all of you later, I am sure.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.